Simon Strauss turned 17 the year Angela Merkel won her first election and has known no other German leader in his adult life. But there is little of his chancellor's famous pragmatism in the debut novel, which set the literary world alight this year. Strauss' Sieben Nächte 7 Nights, which has caused the Tagesspiegel newspaper to hail the 28-year-old as one of the greatest talents of his generation, tells the story of a protagonist who has grown tired of rational consensus-seeking and embarks on a quest to experience the 7 cardinal sins in 7 consecutive nights. Sieben Nächte by Simon Strauss. Tagesspiegel newspaper hailed the author as one of the greatest talents of his generation. Photograph Aufbauveralge compromise. They weaken your handshake, says the narrator as he sets forth into the night. The only desire that counts is that for a beating heart. Strauss is the most prominent member of the Merkel generation engaged in a controversial revival of Romanticism, the creative artistic movement of such painters as Caspar David Friedrich, writers like Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and thinkers such as Friedrich Schlegel, which put German culture on the world map in the late 18th century but played an equally important role in its darker chapters. After the steely ideologies of the 20th century and the fidgetiness of postmodernism, it is not just a new generation that is looking for identity, wrote a conservative commentator, Wolfram Weiler. Strauss offers us a signpost where it could be found, in The Blue Flower, a neo-romantic longing for better understanding. In a manifesto published by a small Berlin publishing house, Korbinian, earlier this year, a young author, Leonhard Hieronymi, announced the dawn of ultra-romanticism in German literature, declaring an end to the unofficial ban on ecstatic feeling and calling on his fellow writers to create a romantic variation of cyberpunk inspired by Blade Runner, E.T. and the films of Werner Herzog. A still from the 1982 film Blade Runner, with Daryl Hannah and Harrison Ford. Photograph www.ronaldgrantarchive.com. Germany's new romantics have found their intellectual lodestar in the Korean-born philosopher Byung-Chul Han, whose series of talks on romanticism at Berlin's University of the Arts last year saw prominent artists, architects and novelists jostling with undergraduates for floor space in packed lecture theaters. Han has championed the romantic cult of the broken heart as a symbol of resistance against what he sees as a modern cult of smoothness, spanning from iPhone design via Brazilian waxing to the Teflon Chancellor Merkel. To me, the romantic world of German poet Friedrich Hölderlin is the world of the future, said Han, whose lectures also featured lengthy playbacks of Schubert's Wintry Cycle. Germany's relationship with the Romantics remains an ambiguous affair, however. For its rich legacy in painting and poetry, many Germans remember how easily the movement's obsession with nature, folklore and purity were absorbed by National Socialism, a movement that the novelist Thomas Mann described as romantic barbarism. Winter Landscape, c. 1811, by Caspar David Friedrich, one of the key figures of late 18th century German Romanticism. Photograph copyright The National Gallery, London. At Germany's federal elections in September, more first-time voters cast their ballot for Angela Merkel's Christian Democratic Union than any other party. But the latest batch of neo-romantic manifestos suggest a less liberal-leaning youth than the statistics imply. Hieronymus ultra-romantic manifesto rails against impostors for whom their homeland is a grave to be urinated upon, while Strauss prophesies that strangers are a danger for all those who believe that the life will continue as it did until now, even though he remains ambiguous whether that could also be a positive. Praise for Strauss' debut has been countered by skepticism. Few critics have declined to mention Strauss' controversial father Botho, himself a leading novelist and playwright who has equated the refugee crisis with the decline of Germany's intellectual tradition. In a column in Die Zeit, German Jewish writer Maxim Biller went as far as hinting at a fascist dimension in Seven Nights imagery, saying that the book reminded him more of the arguably Hitler-sympathizing Scouts movement founder Robert Baden-Powell than poets such as Rainer Maria Rilke. Protesters in Berlin demonstrate against the anti-immigration Alternative for Germany AfD party becoming part of the Bundestag for the first time. Photograph Axel Schmidt, Reuters. In Germany, we have a tendency to focus on Romanticism's perversion rather than its original promise, replied Strauss when confronted with the criticism. But there was something powerful in the Romantic movement's origins, an attempt to explore humanity in its inner form, to search inside ourselves for hidden currents. It was a rejection of uptightness and Biedermeier conformity. Romanticism should be like religion in that way, an individual affair, rather than the opium for the masses it became under National Socialism. Strauss was approached to write his book after he wrote an article headlined "I Yearn for More Quarrels" in Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, where he now works as a theater critic. Tom Muller, an editor at the traditionally left-leaning publishing house Aufbau, challenged Strauss to write his book about the 7 sins in just 7 nights. We wanted immediacy, we wanted it to be raw, we wanted it to carry all virtues and flaws of youth, the lack of moderation, and we wanted paradox and opposition, Muller said. In the 2014 article that inspired the book, Strauss had said that he yearned for conflicts of attitude in moral questions, words that prophetic in the light of Germany's recent elections, which saw an overtly nationalist party return to the country's parliament for the first time in half a century. Did Strauss yearn for Alternative für Deutschland? Of course I was shocked by how well the AfD did in the elections, Strauss said. But with it also came a moment of relief, because it means the populists can no longer rail at those at the top. It is better to have the AfD in parliament than for these currents to ferment in the underground. My generation now has something like a historical mission, to make the parliamentary tradition and the European idea our own again, he continued. We have to find a new, more romantic language to talk about Europe. That is something that Macron has started to do.